Hello and welcome to my first ever episode of this podcast, for which I have not yet named. For this thrilling first episode, I was joined by Mr. Jonathan Naimon, a Cleantech veteran who has gone from working in Congress to founding his own impact investment firm focused on cooling technology innovations. We were also joined by, as he put it, his supermodel and smart dog, Teddy. So without further ado, join me, Jonathan, and Teddy as we dive into topics including how GMOs can change our weather, different models of investing in sustainable technologies, and why people should think differently about energy.
So I actually started off at Columbia, and I studied statistics and political theory there, and I got interested in neuroscience because a guy from MIT named Noam Chomsky did a talk to the philosophy department once on what we could learn about the mind from looking at people who've had strokes and war damage. And I thought that was great. And so I wrote a petition for Columbia to let me study neuroscience, and they said no. And so I dropped out of school and I got a job working for Congress, and it turned out it was the Energy and Commerce Committee. So I ended up seeing how little congressmen knew about science and decided I should learn some more about science and, go to a science school. And so I had some friends in Boston, so I applied to MIT and they let me in. So
not necessarily the straightforward route.
No. I didn't grow. I wasn't spending my time in high school thinking I was going to be a biologist. But then it turned out I had to take all these biology classes in order to take the neuroscience classes. Oh, here, no problem. Here, Teddy, let's go this way. We can walk on the grass. And so anyway, and then it turned out it was interesting. And so no, it was definitely not a straightforward route.
Okay. But then you went back into Congress from doing biology?
No.
So how?
I didn't go back. I worked for Congress basically without a degree, just as a job to do while I had dropped out. That was interesting to me, and I'm very grateful. There's a guy named Peter Hunt who sort of took me under his wing and tried to explain what was going on. And I learned a lot there. And I met Amory Lovins, for instance, who wrote The Soft Energy Path and founded Rocky Mountain Institute. So it was actually a great learning experience. But, we were going through another energy crisis then. They were allocating money for crazy things like making liquid fuels from coal.
Okay.
So it was just a clue.
Wait, and that was before you?
That was before I went to MIT. So I was
a
transfer.
Yeah. Okay.
So I transferred in, and so I transferred in, and then I did the biology there. I also did neuropsychology classes, but it was right before they offered a degree in cognitive science. I was like the last year where you could take classes. They were mainly graduate classes, but they didn't yet have an undergraduate degree. It was still sort of like a research thing. So anyway, I did that, and then I guess I worked for a market forecasting firm for a while on electronic publishing, and then I took a class in environmental law.
Okay. So then you stepped back out of the whole cognitive biology.
Yeah, no, I did. I worked for a while as a research assistant for Howard Gardner, who won a MacArthur, who's like a famous guy. But I realized that you had to have a PhD in order to really do that. And at that time, I wasn't thinking that made sense to do. And I also, I had a housemate who was going to grad school in the Harvard School of Public Health, and she told me that, you could actually, what was that?
Drop my notes.
Tell me if you want me to hold anything.
Oh, no, that's all good.
But she told me that they actually have degrees in environmental stuff that I wasn't aware of at the time. I thought, that was just my personal interest. I like to go hiking, and I think these are interesting issues, but I didn't. So she was really the one who told me that there are programs, so I looked into some programs, and when I was pretty idealistic, so I didn't, at that time, I didn't think electronic publishing was going to be what I do forever, and it obviously was a mistake. It blew up. But anyway, I applied to some programs, and I got into the program at Harvard that she was at, and I also, here, we can walk on the grass. I think that way Teddy keeps crossing in front of people.
Yeah.
He's
got to do some exploring.
He's got to check out. There's new smells. So, but anyway, we just, but anyway, I got into UNC and Harvard, and I just thought the right answer was to get out of Boston and to do something different.
And so you mentioned your personal interests were like hiking, like outdoor stuff. Like, was that something you always did, like growing up, or like, I don't know, like, I've just enjoyed
so I grew up near a forest.
Okay.
And I would go out there.
In Boston?
No, I grew up in Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C., and I would always, go there to chill out when I got stressed. And so it was like, and I did some backpacking trips, and I like that type of thing, kayaking, and I don't know, I like that type of stuff. I also did more traditional sports like tennis and baseball, but there are things that you do with other people, but I like to do this on my own. So and it seemed like I thought of it more as a personal interest as opposed to a career. I didn't view it as a career.
I think it's becoming more and more like relevant today, like people see it.
Yeah, now there's a lot more careers.
Yeah.
I mean, so I've had the experience of, trying to explain to people, no, you really can, incorporate this environmental stuff into your investments. And at a certain point you're flaky, and now at a certain point it's obvious. But anyway, so it started off as a hobby, and then but finding out that there were academic programs in it was interesting, and so I went, and UNC's was actually better for me than I expected, because at Harvard or MIT, you're a small fish in a big pond, and they got a scholarship, so it made day-to-day life easier. Everything was less expensive in North Carolina. Everything is bigger. There's free parking everywhere. It was just, everything was different. And then, they let me do, I would say not all night. I mean, I had a bunch of great teachers, but I also wrote a grant, and we got a grant from NSF. So, they let me do that without having without having a PhD or even a master's. And so that was pretty cool. So UNC was actually a good fit for me.
And then what exactly were you doing at UNC? More environmental?
I was studying environmental management. And so it's a graduate program in environmental management. So, we had courses in risk analysis, in wetland ecology, and industrial hygiene, and cost-benefit analysis, in linear programming, and management of technology. So the management of technology thing is probably the closest to, what I'm working on now. And this feels like 10 degrees cooler. Right?
Yeah, it's pretty nice under the tree.
It's pretty nice.
Got a nice breeze. And so I take it the UNC program is really kind of what set off your career path.
Yeah, yeah. I know the MIT thing was basically, it was largely a dead end. You had to, I mean, what was it? You had to continue going to school to get a PhD. And, obviously, if you happen to have got a PhD and been an early Genentech employee, it was good. But I wasn't actually that
passionate about
it. I was more into the environmental stuff, and I felt like the biology was useful to know.
Definitely.
And, but I was honestly also the better writer, not the better chemical.
Researcher, like
I wasn't. I mean,
lab tech.
Yeah, no, my lab partner was objectively better at pouring chemicals than me, and so we split things up. I knew I was a better, faster writer, and so I would, because if you work on Capitol Hill, you have to write a lot of things very fast.
Yeah.
So it didn't strike me as being that hard. Oh, we have 24 hours.
Yeah,
that's great.
Plenty of time.
Plenty of time. So anyway, so that was a good fit, and then so I liked it.
Nice. And then from UNC, what kind of path did you take? Like find a job like right after? Just like meet some people.
Ironically, it was also I ended up working for an environmental consulting company in DC called ICF.
Okay.
And ironically, once again, it was like a friend of Cindy's who went to the Harvard School, who was really the sort of key hookup to getting an interview. And then, but the other thing that was cool about that job for me is I wrote my thesis on risks from genetically engineered organisms in the environment. And so I wanted to, it's kind of an obscure topic, and I sort of wanted to continue with it, and I didn't want to get a PhD. And so, but ICF got the contract from EPA to do the cost benefits analysis for some rules that they were writing on it.
Oh, okay. So it kind of worked out.
So it worked out really well. Although it turned out it was just one contract and it wasn't a career.
Okay.
But it was an interesting,
good starting point.
It was a good starting point for me, and it helped. It helped me get over.
What are some of the I guess risks of these genetically modified?
Well, the one risk is if you make plants resistant to herbicides, then the plants can grow with the herbicides, but the herbicides are widely used on plants, and then they get into our food. So like glyphosate, which is the chemical Monsanto makes, that's inside of Roundup.
Okay.
Is they've made seeds that are resistant to it. So if you buy like commercial breads, they probably have glyphosate residues in it. And, there are a lot of people who think that the celiac disease is pretty common now, is related to eating a lot of glyphosate.
Oh, wow.
That's, it gets concentrated, if it's in the wheat, it gets concentrated into your crackers or breads or whatever it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's like one risk. Another risk would be, we wrote another risk would be, say you cross one fish with another and you make a fish that is, super tasty, but it eats all the other fish in a lake. That's,
kills all the biodiversity.
It kills biodiversity. And there's a lot of examples of, there's some great books on this actually, with nice maps, which show like where they would periodically, people who would colonize places would say, oh, gee, there are rats here. Let's introduce a mongoose or something. And then the mongoose will end up eating all the birds in the area. Okay. And so there's like a lot of those situations that have happened. So that sort of ecological invasions is another risk. And then the third one, which was what my thesis was on changing the weather. And it turns out, you think that water freezes at 32 degrees, right?
Yeah.
So it turns out if you're say it's like on a plant leaf. The molecules have to be staying still in order for that to happen. And how do they stay still? Well, it turns out there's a bacteria that secretes a protein that sort of holds them still. And so this biologist thought, well, gee, what if we cut out the gene for that protein, maybe it would slow down frost formation, which could save lots of crops like strawberries that are really valuable. And, a 10-minute frost won't kill them,
but a long,
harsh frost would. And if you're in a place like Monterey, that could be that would be a pretty cool thing to do. And so anyway, but if that bacteria also gets into the atmosphere, and so what if it's involved in atmospheric ice formation too? And what if you mess up, what if it goes in the atmosphere and outcompetes the other bacteria and, affects atmospheric ice formation? Or what if it affects just on regular plants on Earth? What if it just affects honeybees?
Have those bacteria been used?
Yeah, they have. They have been used, and, the Earth didn't collapse from it. But the company didn't do well, and it hasn't become a big product. And I'm kind of pleased it hasn't become a big product, honestly. I do think it's ingenious and Steve Lindau's brilliant, but I don't think it's worth that risk to do.
Okay.
So anyway, but basically, ICF
was like a good starting point.
It was a good starting point, and we also got to work on the Montreal Protocol and the regulation of CFCs. And so, so the way it works is, EPA has a lot of lawyers, but they, largely at that point in time, and I think it's still true, outsource the economic analysis to companies with more engineers and economists. And so anyway, so we did that. And so I got to learn about refrigeration a little bit and learn about non-CFC ways of cooling things. So anyway, so it's sort of interesting, but it was, it's a big company. So
and I also noticed you spent like a good chunk of time at, was it the LCF group or
OIRC or LGA?
LGA, that's what it was.
Well, LGA was sort of a unique little boutique. I mean, the way I got there was actually my old boss from Congress, Peter Hunt. He introduced me to someone who was working for this investor research group, and they were thinking of starting an environmental service to look at corporates and environment. And so they hired me. And so I worked on that for a while, and so trying to develop a system for risk rating corporates, which is now pretty popular. There's a lot of people that do that now. And so, but we were pretty early in doing that. And then so from that, we sort of came up with the idea of, hey, what if you built an investment product that used all of our information? We could license it and make some money, and then someone would have a product that would, actually be using this. And so I kind of like talking about it, and I like traveling, and so I was able to get invited to all these places to go talk about this idea, and I convinced some Europeans to actually build a product based on it, and so the way it worked out, one of them paid some money to WBCSD, and WBCSD paid for me to be like an adjunct in Norway, and so I went to move there and helped Storebrand do a...
Wait, so what is WBCSD?
It's like a trade association of corporates that care about sustainable development. And so they're based in Switzerland, and one of the people who was a director there also went to MIT, and we met at some conference, and he kind of liked the presentation. And so they didn't really have any finance people in their group. I mean, when I say finance, I mean, I'm really a research or finance research person. And Jan Olaf, the guy who brought me there, is actually a really sophisticated investor. He just doesn't have any background in it at all. His background is in like marine engineering.
Oh,
And,
wow.
But he like developed like an early internet company in Norway, and he's still involved in electric vehicles.
Oh.
So he's like
Just this really smart guy with a lot of hobbies.
he has I don't even know how many companies he has. He has a lot. But he also, I mean, he has a lot of, he also speaks like 7 languages, and so he's like a really, talented trade association dude too. So he's like both, he's like a triple threat. And so, but I think the other thing is he wasn't really living in Norway. He had a title, and I'm not sure if this part is perfect, but someone needed to do some work at that school, and so I was happy.
To step
I was
in.
happy to step in and have an experience living in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, oh, cool! I get to live in Norway, and they found an apartment for me. It was pretty. It was actually a cool
How was
experience.
it? Was it learning new languages? Anything?
I learned a little bit, but every time I would study like what I thought I would do the next day and come up, say something in Norwegian, and then everyone would just answer me in English because everyone knows English. So I didn't really learn it, and turned
Didn't
out
really need to.
I didn't really need to for getting around day to day. Everyone really spoke English. Some, I mean,
Yeah. You could get
and-
by.
but it was enough to get by. But I wasn't going to get a real tenure track job offer without learning it. And I didn't put in the time to do it, so it just didn't happen. So, but anyway, it was a good experience, and since that worked out, my friend Mark said, "Hey, why don't you come back to the United States? Why don't we set up a little green investing boutique here?" And so Light Green Advisors emerged from that. He was like, "Hey, I also did some work for UBS to also build another investment product." And so he was like, "Well, why not, do this for Americans? I mean,
Yeah.
you're an American. Hey, you speak English. When the U.S. is a big market,
Yeah. Fit right in.
it's easier to do it here. There's no reason intrinsically. I mean, if all the research is actually from the United States, why are you
Why are you taking it
why are you
elsewhere?
doing this in elsewhere?" Well, but I don't have a normal financial background, right? I wasn't working for Goldman Sachs. I was, someone with an environmental degree, which, is not a typical thing for people to develop new fund products. I mean, I would say it's still not typical. I mean, there are a few, but they're not a lot. Like there was actually someone in San Diego who had a water fund, but that's about the only one I could think of. So that's how I ended up at LGA. And LGA started off, the thinking was, hey, climate change is a long-term thing. All of our not all, but a lot of our clients at IRC were pension funds. Pension funds are permanent investors. So if anyone should care about it, they should care about it. Because, right, California will still be here in a few years.
And then now with Sustana, like this whole new.
Right.
So you stopped with LGA, and then what made you want to kind of get into cooling with Sustana? Like how did you make that switch? Was it something you wanted to do? Was it just like, oh, this is a good idea?
So one of the things that happened with LGA is while my day job was to manage stocks for the California State Teachers, I would get pitched on thousands of green ideas from, because if you're a green investor, you get people pitch you with lots of stuff. And So I would go to Greenpeace Christmas parties. I would pitch Greenpeace. I'd say, hey, you should invest with us. And because, Jigger was still officing there. And they thought that the high-tech companies had no environmental impact. So I was like, no, they have the top growing greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. Look it up. So, I ended up getting approached by an entrepreneur in Pennsylvania who had an idea for building green data centers.
Okay.
And so, but the key is to do cooling off of waste heat. And so, I worked on that for a while and, sort of was the environmental person describing the environmental benefits from using waste heat to build data centers. So I got interested in that cooling thing. Then I also, in San Diego, I went to some conference and at the convention center, and the French booth had, someone who had a way of cooling food that reduced spoilage. So I sent them. I have a friend who's in Seattle who's a fish broker, and he used to be a fish banker. Actually, he worked for Christiana Bank. So in Norway, fish is a big business. So Harold was intrigued with this too. So then, we went, and a year later, we went to France to check this out, and we visited some facilities where they were using this technology to cool lettuce. They grow lettuce and they put it in plastic tubs and send it to the markets in Paris, just like they do here.
Yeah.
And it's like a 90-degree day, and this guy is telling me, yeah, this thing really works.
Yeah.
So, but we couldn't get a deal. I'm just sort of viewing these as isolated, cool, clean tech things.
Yeah.
And I also found, another, more recently, the thing that really helped me, the two things that helped me get Sustana going were, one, I got approached by an entrepreneur who has this coolant made with graphene, which has been able to reduce the electric usage in these water-chilled systems that are used in big buildings by over 25%, which is, massive. That's massive. So that's the number one use of electricity, number one greenhouse gas coming out of buildings is not, is operating buildings is that. So that was like a big deal. And so I'm trying to think, well, who would be interested in this really obscure thing? And, plus it's in Malaysia, which is in the middle of nowhere, and it's not an investment grade country. And it's, so I have an old friend from Washington, D.C. who grew up in Mexico City and is really sophisticated about carbon. And so when I was visiting my family in D.C., I called him up and said, hey, this is really cool. He says, you're not going to believe this, but, I'm friends with one of the world's experts on cooling. And so, let's talk with Alan. So we go talk with Alan, and Alan thinks, yeah, this is pretty cool. And so JP's a fun guy, and he doesn't have enough money to bankroll this company, but he's been a money manager before, and he's had, he's been involved with more of this sort of, global non-US money management stuff. So we decided we would build a company that would focus on cooling as like a climate adaptation and on technologies and that are useful for improving. Because we can't extend cooling to everyone if we just use the same old tech and without greenhouse gas emissions going up. So anyway, we decided we'd start a company. And so, if you could think about cooling, everything starts with a transaction, right? Right now, there's 1,000 renewable energy funds, say 500 here, 500 in Europe, right? It starts with a transaction. You have to have a transaction at the start, and then people say, oh, gee, we can do a fund. We can do a few different states. We can do a few different countries. We can do all countries with feed-in tariffs or all islands or whatever. And so I feel like cooling's a little bit like renewables 20 years ago. It's like no one has really thought about it as a separate thing other than the companies that are, that's their primary business. But the idea of investing in cooling, so it sort of came together. I should also say, I also lost CalSTRS as a client, right? So I no longer have, regular income coming in from that. So I'm doing consulting work for companies like Rhombus that are, doing Cleantech stuff. So, but the consulting that they really want is how to get money because they all want to scale. Yeah. That's really the question. What's the financial model for scaling? So
doing that for cooling.
So why not do it? Why not do this for cooling? And why not? So if you think about climate change, cooling is totally vital to like all these adaptations that we do. It's like, well, hey, how is this the right temperature?
Yeah.
How is the food in my refrigerator going to not spoil and be there for a week? Well, it's cooling. How, cooling's involved in it's involved in tons and tons. How are those buildings staying cool if they're facing the sun on a hot day? So cooling is really vital. It's really massive. And, the way progress happens, in a capitalist system is, independent capital comes in and helps small companies grow. And so someone should do it. So, it just sort of is coming together. And, I expect that in 5 years' time, there'll be a bunch of other funds that do this. But finding the first few is really hard. Like with this environmental sustainable investing thing, I would say I safely, did 100 speeches before I got, one state to have a formal RFP for sustainable investing. It's not like people think that it's their problem. They think someone else should deal with it. It's not clear. Like, well, why shouldn't Train be doing it? Why? I don't know. It's innovation is funny because you never know.
Yeah.
Will
it succeed? Will it not?
Well, I think it'll succeed. I think, if I were to look at the experience with LGA, I think it's likely that, someone from Goldman Sachs will build a similar fund that will be bigger and get more money. But, I think we'll be the first institutional cooling fund. And I think we'll be the first, and I think there'll be a big impact. And, for people, we're really lucky in San Diego, right? It's obviously pretty nice here. But if you're in India, it's over 100 degrees in a lot of places. Those people, they really need, cooling is life-saving there. So, admittedly, we're not in a place where it's life and death for us, but
there are places that...
But there are places, yeah, well, even if you just go 25 miles inland, it's over 90 now. People are really hot there, and if they don't have AC, they have to think about where they're going to go. Where can they find ice? And here, at least in the U.S., we have ice makers everywhere, but there are a lot of places that don't have that. And so just in terms of the global market, not saying that this is low risk. If you're an American, know that this is not net low risk. But say in U.S., 90% of the people here have access to coal. India, it's less than 10. So, I'm not saying they're going to get to the U.S. level in 5 years, but it's going to go up. It's going to go up faster than here. And and it's hotter there. It's much hotter there than it is here. So it's going to save lives. It's going to, all these things, when you go to a hospital, all that equipment has, why is it cold in the x-ray room? Well, the equipment works better.
If it's cold.
If it's cold. It's really, I don't know. I see it as, it just seems like sometimes it just seems the little voice in your head tells you that this is what you should be doing. And you go and do it, and you find allies, and hopefully, but I have the feeling, I mean, what I'm finding for this, as opposed to other things, is the people who are attracted to it are people who have had really amazing careers.
Yeah.
People who've done really crazy, obscure things. I mean, JP, took a company public in 2006 on the AIM market that did carbon trading. It's just like, so obscure, but someone who's been looking at climate for a really long time.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm not saying it's going to happen like by December 1st, we're going to close at 100 million. But I do think we will find support for this, and that, it's not like human creativity stopped in 1911 when Willis Carrier, he made a great invention, right? I mean, we're still using vapor compression cooling. I mean, my hat's off to him, but we can do better. I just think there's lots of innovation. I've personally, I feel like, hey, I found innovators in, U.S., Europe, Asia. I mean, the IFC, which is it's like the private sector arm of the World Bank. They did a global call for innovations, and they got over 400 companies, and they've shared it with us, right? And the reason they shared it is because they don't have the capacity to make small investments. Yeah. They're just set up, to give like $100 million checks to governments, but that's not how innovation happens. It's just, my personal opinion is it's just not relevant to innovation. Happens in smaller chunks of money with private companies usually. I mean, that's like things aren't invented by when things are invented by large governments, they're often invented by small groups.
Okay.
And in terms of, how well has large government worked in terms of allocating capital? Well, in energy, when I worked for Congress, like a lot of those programs, they spent a few $1 billion. They didn't work. Yeah. They went bankrupt, pretty much all of those. I don't think there are any programs. Well, but look at what happened with Sun Edison. Look at what happened with Proterra. Like, so right now, how much, I'm not trying to quiz you, but but the question is, so there's $500 billion in electrified transportation this start years. $500 billion. So that's like 100 times more than they put into synfuels back in the Stone Ages. So how many of those will work out? I mean, if Proterra was one of the best funded of them, right, went public in the United States, I mean, it could be. So I don't think government is necessarily the key to solving the cooling problem. And so I'm a little bit, should we go? So I'm skeptical about the government's picking the right winners. I think the government's great for funding R&D, but I think there's really it's really useful. To admit, hey, the U.S. has a cool private sector system, and let's see what happens. And it's not like, I do believe in government regulation. I've been working on environmental stuff my whole career, basically. Except for maybe 1 year where I was working on electronic publishing. But even then, we even had an angle that it was going to reduce the amount of paper that's used.
Yeah, can you talk, since you've been in the industry for so long, can you, how has it changed? Has it, from my understanding, it seems to have gotten more public attention, the whole environmental, field.
Yeah, no, it's got a lot of attention. It certainly has more MBAs now. It used to be really dominated by engineers. I would say it's also got much more politicized than it was in the past. It's people talk about environmental stuff all the time now. It's not obscure. Like, it used to be a pretty obscure thing. People were like, what? What do you really do? And now I've had so many people say, so I would say it's more, people accept it now as a thing, but in terms of what is the right thing to invest in, I mean, it's fascinating what hasn't changed. I mean, so the idea that the answer is just not investing in oil is like an unsophisticated idea that was popular in the 70s. It's still popular today. It's been dressed up, but, it's not adding value. All those people still fly to conferences. Yeah. They're all, so they're, it's like, yeah, electric planes don't work. Yeah. They don't, So like actually figuring out solutions is still in front of us, right? So I'm just sort of, I don't know. So I would say that there's tons more money from both, particularly the private sector, and tons more from the government now. I would say the government is pretty, like it was before, is pretty prescriptive about what it thinks is good.
Yeah.
And it may be wrong about it. That's the downside. But there's more money. There's much more private money now than before. And it's no longer, you're no longer necessarily considered a hippie. You're laughing, but I've certainly heard people describe how, I'm just serving hippie investors, and that's sort of what I'm doing. And,
Yeah, honestly, I feel like hippies, or at least it's just not really relevant.
I don't see what the connection
anymore.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel like we're in a different age now. We're in an age where, hey, everyone realizes there's a problem. We disagree on what, like, hey.
I'm also happy to start walking back in the drive.
Okay, yeah, we can go back. Teddy, let's go this way. We're going to do something different today. So
is there a way to loop around?
Yeah, we could go up that ramp.
Oh, okay.
There's a faster way back.
Okay, perfect.
Actually. I think everyone accepts it as it's a thing now. Yeah. But what do you do? Like, there's a line. Did you ever read The Monkey Wrench Gang by any chance?
I have not.
So it's by Edward Abbey. He's a. Let me just.
Can
I go on this side? Or
yeah.
Or do you want to be on that side?
No, this is perfect.
What?
This is good.
Okay. So anyway, there's a line in the Monkey Wrench Gang. These people are, they're sort of radical environmentalists, and they're blowing up signs and stuff like that. And then they're on the lam, and at a certain point, they're running away in a Jeep using gas.
Okay.
And one of them says to the other one, don't you think it's kind of funny that we're relying on the same gas that those guys down there are working, working on? And I think about that every time I see, bikes go by, because I say, hey, those bikes are made of metal and with petroleum tires. So I just think, we have all this opportunity, but it's still a challenge to figure out what to do, But I don't know. That's not a good.
Is there anything you wish more people knew about, like sustainable investing or this whole field of investing?
Yeah, I wish people would memorize would know how electricity isn't the same as energy, and how most of the energy we use is really not electric. And I wish people knew that boats were made out of oil. These beautiful boats here are made out of oil and metal. I wish they realized that, the engineers that figure out how to make that are saving, maybe saving planet, and the planet's not that fragile. People are, I've been working on climate change for a long time, but the world is not going to come to a screeching halt if the temperature goes up another 1/10 of a degree. And I wish people would be practical about it and say, hey, what can we do? In day-to-day, for most people, air travel is their number one thing if you're worried about greenhouse gases. So, it's pretty easy, to figure out less is more.
Yeah.
But it's also clear that, the professional climate community flies a lot, and so there's some irony in that. And I don't know. I mean, I'm basically optimistic that people will figure out, though, that people will come up with innovative stuff.
Yeah.
And we'll figure out solutions, and we'll get them financed, and that we'll figure it out. I mean, if you think about ozone depletion, the ozone hole is really not there now. There are some examples of success. And so that's an example of a success. The Paris Accord is an example of a non-success. And so I just don't, I think if we're pragmatic, we can, we'll come up with stuff that works. I don't know.
And one thing I was most interested in is, like, are there any ways, like...
Oh, wait, sorry.
No worries.
Come on, Teddy. What?
Are there any ways that, like, let's say an individual can be like, I want to put my money towards sustainable things? Like, are there ways to do that? Or is it just, like, big money?
Oh, absolutely.
Individual?
No, there's lots of sustainable investment platforms. And the thing that I would say is most unique about what's available now versus what was available like a few years ago is, like, a few years ago, you could just like buy a stock fund or a bond fund, kind of like the ones that I was working on for California, and that was about it. But now, through crowdfunding, you can invest in all kinds of stuff. I mean, if you think, like, I'll just give you an example. So I'm interested in cooling stuff. So I found someone who made a small little desktop cooler. It's about this big. And, he crowdfunded his company. And you can invest in that type of thing if you're interested in it. And it's, it uses water and fans, and it's sort of an alter. But there are lots of interesting investments you can make as an individual if you have talents, whether they're in the communications area or the sciences or in engineering. There's an environmental side of everything. What is the best paint? What is the best paint in terms of reducing emissions? Well, people have figured out that bake-on paints really have lower emissions than the old-fashioned ones that you spray. And so someone figured that out. I mean, there's an environmental side of everything. So I really think that it depends what, you can use your own talent, or you can invest in other people doing stuff that you like. But I think the whole crowdfunding revolution opens up the possibility of just helping other people who have their own ideas so you don't have to use centralized ideas. I mean, there is a theory that if you just pay your taxes, the government will take care of it. That's another idea, but I wouldn't bet on that working every time. And I don't know. I mean, if you happen to be interested in investing in sustainable cooling, I mean, we're doing that. But I would just. But the other thing that I would just say is that most people don't think about much is water usage. Like, it turns out one of the biggest users of energy in California is pushing water around. And it turns out so who are the biggest users of diesel in all of California? Well, Imperial Irrigation District is the largest, right? So it's a public sector entity that pumps all this water from all these places to grow crops for us to eat. So thinking about water, like how much water do we use? What plants will we plant? Will we plant, these type of desert plants, or will we plant those type of Kentucky plants? I mean, they all have water implications, and all the, everything I don't know. I think, but water is energy, and I think that's something that if you think about your water usage, you can end up having a massive impact on other things. And that's also something, I mean, if I wasn't doing a cooling fund, I would do a water fund, because I think water is, another area where we're still relying on 100-year-old technology. And there's, I can't believe there's nothing that's been invented in 100 years. I mean, I visited, I went in the Netherlands, they have a place that uses, ozone treatment for municipal water. And, that's still considered experimental. It's like, yeah, things move very slowly. It's funny. But I would say, these are both areas which have, use a ton of energy, have a big planetary impact, are totally essential to surviving and having a high quality of life. So, that's not that good. I don't know. But were you thinking more about like things to do in your daily life? Like,
I mean, that was definitely
like not eating meat. And
or no, that was you answered it how I was.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Intending. Somewhat.
One second, we're just going to visit a coffee shop just in case it's open. It's actually closed, but I want him to think that I'm letting him see it. So he's gonna double check to make sure. He knows they have the good treats. He's gonna find it. So I mean, if it were open, I feel like I'm fading a little bit, but hopefully there's some material there.
Yeah, no, this is good.
But a lot of it is, I mean, it's a very nonlinear path. I mean, the other thing that I would just say is interesting is, I thought I was hostile to capitalism when I was 20 or 21. I mean, I viewed my role at working for Congress as regulating them. And then here I am. I'm one of them now. So, but it all seems like it made sense at the time. And I still feel like, hey, Amory Lovins, he also, tried to start a bunch of companies, and, we're doing what we can, right? I mean, we're trying to do positive things. And so, we're just, I don't know. But, I mean, it's our environment. We may as well
try to do something.
Try and do something for it. And
definitely.
See. Look. It's closed. Quick French fry check here.
Yeah.
Just in case they drop some on the floor. Now, are you parked on this street?
Yeah, I'm down over there.
Okay.
And just to, I guess, wrap things up, thank you for
sure
coming on the walk.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you for doing this on a walk and accommodating me on the walk. I feel like, I don't know if it came out as polished as it would have come out if it was, but I thought it was, actually, I remember having a meeting with this, so Jan Olaf had someone who was working as an assistant to him, who was brilliant, named Carolina Dale Ditlev Simonson. And I remember when we had a meeting once, you said, well, let's just do a walk instead of sitting down. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, well, why don't we do this all the time? It's really nice. And, all these people, I mean, it's really nice if you have, assuming you're
depends where you are too.
Yeah. I mean, if we're also we're in a gorgeous place, and I feel it's kind of funny because, so here's like an interesting vignette. So I'm a little bit of an environmental extremist in my own life, right? So like, I don't use air conditioning on my own, right? I feel like, hey, if I have two parents that have skin cancer and one brother who does, and I think that the CFCs are related to it, I can manage to not. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, you go to an airport, it's air conditioned. That's fine. It's great. And it turns out I am more productive with air conditioning. So it's not like I'm pure, but I do. But we live in San Diego where it's like an option. There are a lot of people who live in other places. So San Diego is just such an easy place compared to other.
Definitely. Phoenix, like it's not even
Phoenix,
possible.
it's like, yeah, like there's people from Phoenix that are, that are here that I see in,
Yeah.
I see them walking their dogs in the morning because they're programmed to walk at 6 a.m. because they know that's the only time in Phoenix they can go without the dog's feet collapsing or, getting burned because of the heat. And so we're just so lucky to have this. And so here, we have to imagine warm windows.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that when we were looking at those windows. It's like, it's kind of, if they're facing directly south, maybe they could be too hot, but it's pretty nice here.
Definitely.
And so, hey, how's it going? So, it's really pretty. It's kind of a joke, but I don't know. So, hopefully it'll be useful. I just thought of one other thing. So it is interesting anyway, just how a few people have been instrumental in terms of opening up my career paths. I think Peter Hunt in particular was instrumental in terms of opening it up first, changing my energy and commerce experience from being essentially a grunt worker into being something that was totally educational and I still benefit from today. And Sidney Schumacher told me that you could even study environmental stuff as a field. Like I didn't think that was, I don't know, it just wasn't on my radar screen and that it was a career path. That wasn't.
And she was your friend from Harvard?
Yeah, well, she was going to Harvard. We lived in a group house together. So she just, she was just another person. She was another person in the house. At that time, I was working for that electronic publishing company. So we were just talking about stuff and she was like, oh yeah, you can do this. And then later on, Mark Sten also was, I sort of saw my career heading towards being like in a university somewhere writing papers. But, he really was like, why not form a private sector company and to, try to, still doing research stuff. So Hartman Group, which he worked for, really did brilliant organics research stuff. Horizon Melt, that really was just something that they came up. They weren't the owners, but they were the consultants that really help make it happen. And so he really played a role in my thinking that I could be on the other side of it, not just working as a consultant and writing reports, but actually, being a principal. And so that was, So I've benefited a lot from other people in terms of that. So
that's really cool.
Okay.
Well, I think this is the end. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That was very good.